It's a very dramatic gospel reading, am I right? And it's a follow-up to what we read last week. So for those of you that weren't here, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus announces his public ministry in Galilee by reading from the scroll of Isaiah. And really, as I said last week, that is a call to us to understand the heart of how Jesus perceived his ministry. And you see that the crowd really are amazed at his gracious words that come out of his mouth, and suddenly everything just turns. And it reminds me of how quickly a crowd can turn on you. Hey? One day they can be adoring you, and the next day, like you're whatever that word is that you don't use in church. And today's readings are full of that kind of paradox, of in ministry, when we are called to follow Jesus and to do the will of God, there are times when people will love us for that will grow in popularity, they'll think that we're amazing, they'll all want to be close to us, and then there are times when the things which we have to say and do may perhaps not be that acceptable, may not be what people want to hear. And we read in Jeremiah, and shame the prophet Jeremiah, please never call your child Jeremiah. This man had a very difficult life. Jeremiah is called as a young man, but he's called into a context that is very difficult. Israel is on the brink of being invaded by the surrounding powers. Jerusalem will be sacked. The temple walls will be broken down, and he himself will be taken into exile. And it's in this context that God raises him up. And we read that beautiful, intimate passage of knowledge that God has of Jeremiah. Since before you were formed in your mother's womb, I have known you, and I have ordained you, and I have called you. And God gives Jeremiah something really special in that moment that I think we all need to hold on to when things get tough in our journey with God and in the ministry that God calls us to. He says, I will be with you. Do not be afraid of them. I will be with you. And we read the same thing in the Psalm this morning, that in our time of trial and tribulation, in our times of trouble, we are able to call on God. God is with us in those moments. And God is a refuge for us, is a stronghold for us, is a place of healing and hope for us. And so as we sit here at the last day of January 2022, have all of you started writing 2022? Because I figured that I'm still writing 21. As we stand here on this brink of this new year, lots of us may have made New Year's resolutions that will fall away as the year goes on, and some of them will actually maintain and sustain. But it's important as we go into this year of 2022 to truly understand who we are. What is our identity? And in the season of Epiphany, we are told that we are exploring the revelation of God, the manifestation of God to the world. And we, as the church, as the ecumene of Christ, we are that revelation of God to the world. This is our true identity. Our identity is not in the clothes we wear, or the car we drive, or the house we live in, or the job we may or may not have. Our true identity is as the revelation of God's love to the world. And we are called into our own context, like Jeremiah was, like Jesus was, like Paul was. We are called in our own context to be that revelation of God's love and grace to the world. And I think that this is really the paradox of our faith. As people who know me well will know that I say, that we are called to be fully present in this world, and yet we are not of this world. So we are called to be fully engaged in this thing called life. We are called to minister into the context in which we are living and born, and yet we are not of this world. And this paradox is something that we work out in the day-to-day as God calls us to be his revelation of love and grace to those around us. And again, the readings tell us that in this we are completely empowered by the Holy Spirit. We are empowered by Christ for this ministry. So we are in the world, but we are not of the world. And we are called in this ministry as people who are put out there to show a different way. As Christians, we are called in the Gospels a very peculiar people. God calls us in the Old Testament a treasure. Peter talks about us, and he quotes that also from the Old Testament, as a holy nation, a royal priesthood, a peculiar people. And so what this tells us is that Christians, when we confess to follow Christ, when we confess that we are disciples, we become a very peculiar people. We are, I like to share as an example, we are not Pavlov's dog. I don't know if you remember in the 70s there was the psychologist, behavioral psychologist called Pavlov, and he showed that you could train any animal. And so he would ring the bell and give the dog food. Ring the bell and give the dog food. Ring the bell and give the dog food. And just before dogs eat, they begin to salivate. I don't know if you've got dogs that some of them can salivate a lot. And eventually he would ring the bell and not give the dog food, but it would still salivate. And we are not Pavlov's dog. They don't ring the bell and then we react in the way that the rest of the world reacts. We are called to a different standard. We are called to be in a different lifestyle. And it's really Paul that speaks to the heart of this in his beautiful chapter 13, An Ode to Love. But I want to give it some context. Paul, for chapter 12 and chapter 14, is talking into a division in the church in Corinth around spiritual gifts. So they are a deeply divided congregation, and they are having many fights about this. And so what Paul is speaking there, if you remember, he ends chapter 12 talking about the variety of gifts. We read it last week, and we're in the body, and one is not better than the other. And then he says something incredibly significant. He says, let me show you a more excellent way. And then he goes into this ode on love. And what Paul is saying there is that the excellent way is love. The standard we are called to as disciples is that dual commandment of love. And so he goes into the nature of that love. Love is kind, love is patient, it's not envious, it bears all things, endures all things, hopes all things, bears all things. And another beautiful thing that he says in there is, you may have any spiritual gift, you may be brilliant, but if you don't have love, it is of no use to anybody else. And so what is this loving response that we are called to give in times of conflict, in times of trial, in our context in which we are called to be that manifestation of love? I would offer that love as we are discussing it now, is not a feeling, it's not an emotion. It's not that thing that makes your heart race when you see the love of your life. We're old now, but some of us are still young enough to have that moment of meeting the person who just makes your heart race. We're not talking about that emotive love. We're talking more about what the psychologist Scott Peck calls love is an unconditional positive regard. Love is a choice. We choose to love other people, not because of who they are, but because of who we are. Not because of what they do, but because of what we are called to be in this world. We are claimed by God's love. And so when we look at other people, we are choosing to see them as God sees them. We are choosing to do what God's grace does, which is to hate the sin and love the sinner. We are called in that moment to make a choice. And so this is really difficult, and I think especially with people that piss you off and people that irritate you and rub you up the wrong way. So luckily, we are not called to like everybody. You don't have to like everybody, but you are called to choose to love them. And in loving them, you are holding an unconditional, positive regard for them. And this is the attitude that allows us to be God's grace and presence in the world. We do not have to accept bad behavioral patterns. We do not have to like what the person is doing, but we see them in positive regard. We see them as someone that is made by God, called by God, and loved by God. And so, as we go into this week, I think the challenge that the Gospels are putting out for us is no matter what we encounter in this week, and we will encounter many things, how can we begin to surrender ourselves to allow the love of God to work in us, to feel ourselves as truly loved, and to be able to love others, even in the face of their rejection. And so I'm offering a prayer that we can maybe pray together, as I offered one last week. This one is St. Ignatius of Loyola. He prays the Susipi prayer. And it's a beautiful prayer to help us every morning, and in those moments when we have that experience of somebody, to really allow God to be at work in us. And it goes like this. Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, all my memory, all my understanding, my entire will, all I have and call my own. You have given me everything. Everything is yours. To you, Lord, I return it. Do with it what you will. Grant me only your love and grace. It is enough for me.